friends, and welcome to Freeze and Fawn, my third video in a little series about overhelping and how I've been exploring that for myself, why I became an overhelper. That was last video, and the first one was just kind of an introduction. So today it's a wintry day still here in Alberta, and I'm sitting by a nice little fireplace. It's a gas fireplace, but I still enjoy it. So welcome in, have a seat, and listen in as I read from my journal, series number 3, Fawn or Freeze, the Reluctant Helper. Have you ever encountered a deer on the road while driving, maybe at night, and it stops dead still and stares into your oncoming headlights? That's a scary experience because sometimes, when it's icy especially, you can't hit the brakes in time. But that idea of fawn, right? What a deer does, deer in the headlights kind of look, where they just kind of freeze, right? And then they stare at you and it's not a good thing for them, and it's not a good thing for us either. So freeze and fawn are described as involuntary survival mechanisms that occur when fight or flight feels unsafe. So I thought that description was interesting because I always thought that freeze or fawn responses were merely due to your personality, like you would just choose one of the 4: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, kind of just based on, I guess, what worked for you. But I didn't realize that they were related to fight or flight in the way that if you can't run and you can't fight for some reason, then you will default to those other ones, freeze or fawn. According to Psychology Today and WebMD, I did a little research to try and make sure I understood this. Freeze causes paralysis, numbness, or dissociation to endure a threat, while fawn involves people-pleasing, appeasing, or boundary breaking to avoid conflict. And that last sentence just really sums up so much of my life. If I had to pick one that defines my experience, it would be fawn. And that's why I titled this video, When I Didn't Want to Help, or Saying No but Doing It Anyway. I'm not sure what I'm going to title it quite yet, but that was my process. I spent so much time doing things I didn't want to do simply because I felt I couldn't say no, or that my no did not count for some reason. Most of the time, I didn't try to say no, I just did what I was told. This was very convenient for friends in my growing up years who needed a companion for whatever shenanigans they wanted to get up to. For example, sending me to drive by the boy's house that they liked to see if he was outside, or going for a walk around the library with them so they had an excuse to get away from school and have a smoke, or sitting beside them on the bus. Sometimes, people would say, come sit with me when I walked into the bus, and even if I didn't want to, I didn't really know how to say no, which seems so basic now, but or skipping school to walk to A&W, which I only did one time in high school, and this friend convinced me, and it was so ironic because it was the one time in my entire school career that my dad came by the school to see me for some reason, and I wasn't there. It's funny, my dad has always been able to have a sixth sense about when I'm in trouble or up to something. I'll save that for another video. So these friends weren't like bad people, and a lot of them, most of them grew up to be wonderful people, and they weren't intentionally, I don't think, trying to abuse me or anything, but just my inability to use my no, and I always would just freeze, fawn, say yes. And I'm just really grateful that I had decent friends. And I think God was sparing me from a lot of things by putting me in a more sheltered environment. So I'm thankful for that, even though sometimes, feeling like you've been really sheltered can have negative outcomes too. But I think that it was good for me in a lot of ways. Then there were the adults. I may have told this story before, but one time, okay, so set the stage. It is a cold Sunday morning. I was really sick. I probably shouldn't have been going to church, but you had to be pretty well half dead to not go to church. So we were always scrambling, running a little bit late, so many kids to get ready for church and a long drive in. So we all piled into the 15-passenger van, got to church, and walking in, and meeting me in the aisle was my music teacher. And it was just before the service was about to start, like seconds in. And he says, "You're going to have to do something. You're going to have to lead the singing, because I have to take my wife. She was pregnant and she was really sick. I have to go. My wife is sick." And I didn't even hesitate, but inside my whole body was screaming, "No, I can't do this." I could hardly talk. I had such a terrible cold. Anyway, I was screaming inside, "I can't do it." But I did it. I stood there with no accompaniment. I just opened the hymn book, and the first hymn that I thought I knew, I just said, "Let's turn to this hymn and let's sing." And I was probably 16 years old, around there, maybe even younger. But I just remember the feeling of shame that I wasn't doing a very good job. And since then, I've thought back and I thought, why would he put me in that situation? Why was that my responsibility? Just because I knew a bit of music? I guess I should be thankful that he could trust me. That's what I've been told about this situation. Be thankful that you could do it. Be thankful that you had the experience. But I'm like, no, I wish that the adults had stood up and said, "That's okay, we can handle it." The pastor, had, or someone, but it was so much pressure on me. And sometimes when you just say yes to everything, people don't realize that, right? They think you want to do it, and they're not going to jump up and stand in your way. So I get that too. I understand that. Anyway, where did this intense people-pleasing fawn response come from? I'm not actually sure. I do have a few guesses. The first time I heard that term people pleaser was hearing my mom describe me that way. "You're such a people pleaser, Pam," she said. And I smiled inside because I thought it was a compliment. It took a few more years before I realized it was not. The point is that a great deal of my overhelping came from not being able to say no, and I continually ended up in situations where I should have at least taken a beat to think things over. Like when I was asked to continue being a camp counselor at age 14, when I'd only signed up for a few weeks. Instead, I said yes until I had been there all summer. And I think that the accumulated years of doing things like that really contributed to kind of cycles of burnout and depression. Or can you do the vacation Bible school? Or can you babysit for us? I know it's last minute. When I had an exam, the next morning and needed to study. So these are just a few examples of just countless things that happened. And to be honest, I don't have really good memories of my teenage years, but These are the things that I do remember. So the shame and anxiety I would feel even thinking about saying no was overwhelming. And I still feel that way a lot. I recently came upon a quote that I wrote out and put above my computer so I will see it often. It says, "People that love you care about how they make you feel." People that love you care about how they make you feel. And I think that's the deep grief that I carry with me, the knowing that so many who said they loved me and pushed me past my no, asked me to do things they knew would be difficult, even when I was exhausted and burnt out. And that is the reason my photos of the teenage years look like they do. I was already becoming cynical and jaded and burnt out before I even left for college. If I ever did try to take a bit of time for myself, I was called selfish. So I learned to keep smiling and carry on, and that life was simpler and more bearable if I just did exactly what I was expected to do. So I did find a few photos. I have hardly any photos of myself as a teenager, and in most of the photos, I actually look pretty happy. So maybe it's just, maybe I'm superimposing this feeling of being jaded and cynical onto them. Here's one of me, the gas station. I'm not quite sure. I was smiling there. I look happy. Oh, here's one. I was probably about 12, and I was busily writing the thank you notes as my aunt and uncle opened their wedding gifts. Here's one, and sitting with my sister on our lawn, looking very white in the winter, or in the Alberta sun. Here's one where you can kind of see that look on my face, and I got my family in here, but that's okay. They're all really little. You can kind of see that, I don't know, not impressed look, I guess. There's just a few more. There's me on a horse. I did spend some time doing that. Here's a couple from a little bit older teenager. It just kind of a snarky look on my face. There's another one with quite a snarky look on my face. Anyway, oh, this one I just thought was funny. My friends and I bought this pack of cigars, and here's me trying to be really cool with my Esprit sweatshirt, smoking a cigar. So I thought that'd be entertaining. And because I keep talking about these photos from my teenage years, I thought I should try and find a few. And even though those weren't necessarily the ones I was thinking of, yeah, nobody in my family really took pictures back in the day. So let's finish up here. I think a lot of the confusion and self-hatred I felt in my 20s formed out of that denial, that dissociation from who I was. I was trudging through life when I could have been soaring, at least sometimes. Well, I think I have spilled enough ink and words on this for today. The last thing I want is to wallow in self-pity, and I know, on the whole, I lived a very privileged life. But I'm still allowed to be a bit sad about the grip this fawn response has had on my life, and how it's contributed to overextending myself, getting in situations I don't want to be in, and just struggling. Perhaps that's the reason for my isolation these past 2 years. So I've kind of been wondering, like, why do I just not want to see anybody? In a lot of ways, the last while. I'm trying to learn to say no, to move past freeze and fawn and get to really living authentically, me, with no apologies. And I'm not there yet, but at least I know the path I'm supposed to be on. I know a little bit about why I was doing what I was doing, and it's been helpful to just unpack it a bit and put some words to it. And so thank you for coming along. And I'd love to hear if you've experienced things like this, if you struggle with one of those responses, and yeah, if you have any insight, I'm totally happy to hear it. So have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon in the next video.